Hi guys. So today I'm going to demonstrate how to paint this pear, and to do that we're going to be using acrylic paints. So I can give you some tips on how you might use acrylic paints and some different techniques so that you can build your skills in this area and see how acrylics can work when you are working on canvas. So I've got a block canvas here. It's about 20 centimetres squared, but if you want to go rectangular or bigger then it's entirely up to you. It will translate into different sizes. So let's make a start. I have already painted crimson red, although it doesn't matter what red. I would go lighter rather than darker if you've got another tint of red, but it doesn't matter. So I've covered it and it's now completely dry. Okay, it's completely dry. This is called an underpainting, and it's always nice to do an underpainting because it adds just lots more texture. The more layers that you add, the better. It also acts as a clash when you're putting other colours on top of it. So for instance, if you've got say the painting we're doing, it's got hints of red in it, so if we don't cover it all up it won't matter because it will come through and add a bit more to the painting. But also there's some bright green, and that is a complementary colour to red, so it will make the colour pop. So it's got lots of different reasons behind having an underpainting, and it kind of just fills in more gaps, and you'll see as we go on how this red underpainting really helps. With some paintings you might choose to do a yellow ochre background maybe, or a blue is the frequent colours for underpaintings. Again, they might just be used because they're clashing with the colour on the top, or it might be because it blends in. So if you're doing seas and skies and things like that, you might have an underpainting of blue, and then you can add your clashing colours to add shadows and things, but it keeps the painting quite harmonious. This one is quite colourful, quite eye-popping, as you can see, with all the different colours, so I've gone for red. Okay, so I covered it in red, not too much of a thick layer. You'll see if you've gone too thick, you'll start lifting off the paint underneath, and you'll see that happen again in a moment when I start painting. But now it's dry, it's set, so we can't undo any of this. But the beauty with acrylics is if something goes wrong, you can paint over the top of it once it's dry. So there's no fear of going wrong, because if a shape goes wrong or if something goes wrong, you literally leave it to dry or get a hairdryer. I've got a hairdryer here to speed it up today. And you can paint over the top of it. So never give up with acrylics. It's all about layers, and sometimes it works when the layer's still wet because it helps you blend, or if it's dry and it's starting to lift off because you've worked too much into it, just leave it, dry it off, and then you can add another layer. So I'm going to show you those kind of techniques today. So now this is dry, I'm going to draw in my basic shape for a pear, and with that I'm going to use chalk. Now chalk is great because you can see it and you can also rub it out. Okay, you can also, you'll be painting over the top of it, so unlike charcoal or pencil where it could blend with the water and go quite murky, chalk won't. So what I'm going to do to start this pear off is fairly near the top. I'm going to just do a little curve, that's going to be the top, and then down here you just mark roughly where the pear is going to go. Okay, so I've got it just off the bottom here, just so you don't end up with a small pear in the middle. So this is like a peak at the top here, and this will curve around here. Okay, now what's wonderful about this is because pears and any fruit and veg are kind of organic shapes, it's not going to matter if it's not perfect, because everyone, you know, every pear is different and you can't really go wrong with the shape. As long as you've got it kind of curved here and then it's going up to the point, you can have it kind of curve inwards a little bit here. So it's just a rough guide, a bit of a flat bottom so it looks like it's going to stand up. There we go. Okay, and roughly about a third, just because of the rule of thirds, just to make it look a bit balanced, you can put your background in. I recommend just using a ruler here, just so it's even both sides. But we won't be doing this for a while, so it doesn't matter if you miss that out or if it gets rubbed out in the meantime. Okay, so we've got a basis of our pear drawn out. So what I'm going to do is do another layer of solid colour just to get started, okay? So I'm going to use yellow ochre for this. So I'm going to put it into my palette. Now you don't want to put too much paint onto a palette because it dries fairly quickly, and once it's dry it's ruined. So make sure the lid goes on real tight and make sure you're looking after your paints as you go. Now my brush is dry, there's no need for any water at this stage. So I'm using a flat brush. Now a flat brush is good because, as you'll see, when I come up to the edges, I can kind of follow the edges nicely with the edge of the brush. Okay, you can use a rounded brush, but a flat brush will just give you, for a beginner especially, a nice crisp edge to follow. Okay, as you can see, that underpainting now is being covered because acrylic is opaque, so once that underpainting is dry, the next colour will sit on top of it. So as you can see, this is why it's good, and you can undo mistakes because it will just paint over the top. You wouldn't be able to do this with watercolours, for example, over the top of red paint. So by all means have bigger brushes if you need to. It'll cover it if your canvas is a bit bigger than mine, because you're just doing a solid colour at the moment. Okay. More paint. So as you can see, there's a bit of red coming through, but it doesn't matter because you're going to add some blending. There was going to be some red textured elements to this pear anyway, so if it's not solidly covered, it doesn't matter. It probably won't let you. Anyway, you need to let it dry and do a second layer before it will let you put enough paint on there to completely cover the red underneath. Okay? So it doesn't matter if you've got any red showing, but try and do it fairly thick, and you'll see why in a minute, especially around this edge, because I'm going to do some blending in a minute before it dries. So I'm going to work a bit quick, and I'll put an extra bit on there before we move on. Okay, so that's yellow ochre on top of a red. A crimson red is what I used, but it's flexible. You won't be able to use a really light yellow for this because it won't sit on top of the red. You do need a paint that's got more of an opaque quality to it, and if the paint's too light, like a bright yellow, for example, you're not really going to have much of a white base mixed into that paint to allow you to layer it. So if it's too pale, it won't sit on top well at all. So I do recommend yellow ochre just to get the pear going. Okay, now I am going to get some green in my palette quickly. Okay, this kind of colour green, although it doesn't really matter. And whilst I've still got this yellow ochre on my brush, I'm going to dip into the green, just on the tip, okay? And I'm going to go on to the edge, and I'm just going to cover that edge with some green. And what's going to happen is when that green runs out on the brush, it will start to mix with the yellow as well. So the yellow is still wet on the canvas, but it's also on your brush. So as you can see, it's quite easy to blend now. And you can blend it into the yellow that's still wet on the canvas. You see? So you just put in a bit of green on the edge here, You can come all the way round, and then you can blend it out. So just lightly stroke towards the end and it will go into the yellow. Now if your brush needs a bit more yellow on it to make it blend a bit better, then you can. So don't take the green too far into the painting, but just on the edge here, and you'll see that it just blends out into the yellow. And if you need to put more yellow on your brush to get that to blend a bit more, then you can do. Okay, you see? And it's blending into the middle. So I've just got it around the edge here. I'm going to come up here a little bit because I'm going to have a bit of shadow up here too. So I can go quite high. So I can go all the way down here. I need to, because the yellow paint's dried, I just need to add some more to my brush. And while it's wet underneath, it will blend out. Okay, so that's kind of wet on wet, we would say, because you've got wet paint underneath and you're adding more on the top of it. Okay, so to not make it too green, I could just add a bit more yellow just to take it back slightly. Now what you will notice, if it's kind of drying underneath, is that it will start lifting off the canvas. So just leave it. So that's happening to me now. So I'm just going to clean my brush. But this is going to be dry now, because you have to work fairly quick. If it starts lifting off underneath, then it's best just to stop. Clean off your brush. I might get some more yellow ochre on this side, wet, and put another layer just to wet it again while I mix in the other side. Okay, so I've got a bit more yellow ochre. I've now got a clean brush. It's not completely dry. If you keep it a little bit damp, it might just help the paint to flow on top of the layer, but not too wet, otherwise it will start to pick off what's underneath. So let's just grab some more red. Now it's a good idea to change the red tone. Have I got a different red? I have here. I might change the tone of red just to make it different to the outside, but it's not the end of the world if it's the same. Okay, so let me just put some yellow ochre back on the top here, just so it's wet again. You can see it's kind of covering up more of the red too now that that under layer is dry. Okay, so I'm now going to dip into some red, and I'm going to do the same on this side. So I'm just going to take it around the edge here and just, while I've still got yellow on my brush, just blend it in. So you're not going to see it too much because you've got the red background. But remember, all that's going to be covered up. Okay, so I've just put a little layer on, and because my brush is wet and it's still got some yellow on it, it's going to blend it out. Okay, so don't make the green or the red come far into your painting, just enough. Okay, and I'm going to put a bit more red at the top here to get it a bit of shape. I'm using the side of my brush and it's just blending nicely into the yellow because it's still wet. If it was dry, you wouldn't be able to do this. You would need to put yellow on your brush as well, but while it's wet, okay, you can do it. Now, because this has got a bit of shape to it, you want to bring the red in slightly. So let me, because this is dry, let me show you. I'm going to put a bit of red on the edge here. And I'm just going to bring it slightly further into the pear here at this point, just on the neck, and then I'll blend it out again. Just add a bit more shadow in this part of the pear, because this would happen because you've got a kind of curve and then another spherical shape here, haven't you? So to just bring this in a little bit here will just help to shape your pear. Okay, all right. If it's too harsh, get some yellow ochre and just bleed it back out again while it's still wet. But if it doesn't work and it's drying, just let it dry, just leave it. So you can see it's added a bit of texture now. I've got a bit of shadow here, a bit of shadow on this side. It's kind of gone into itself here a little bit. Let me clean my brush off and I'll try and fix that bit. It's just where it was lifting off the page. But it will lift off more and more if you're not careful. You see I've got a bit of a hole there now. It's because I'm talking and not painting. A bit more yellow ochre just to fill in that gap. But if it just keeps lifting off and giving you a hard time, then you just have to wait for it to dry, okay? It keeps lifting off for me there now, so I'm going to leave it, this hole here, and I'll fill it in a moment so you can see how you can undo it. So what we have to do is we've got to dry this, okay? We've got to dry it, so I'm going to get my hairdryer and let me just... Now you'll know when it's completely dry because it won't be shiny in the light, okay? Mine's a bit shiny there, so it's a bit damp, but it's okay. Let me just dry off my brush. Let me just see if I can fill in that space there now. I'm going to put a bit of green on my brush again to come around the edges there. I'm going to grab a bit of yellow ochre on my brush. And let's just blend that back out into the pear here. There you go. I'm salvaging it slowly, a bit more yellow ochre. And because it's dry underneath, it's now allowing me to cover up that gap. Okay. Now we're going to put yellow in the middle, so I'm not going to be too worried about this bit here, but I feel that's blended back out a little bit better. I've kind of topped that up a little bit. Okay, we now need some yellow, okay? So not ochre yellow, something a bit brighter, okay? I'm going to get my rounded brush so it's less harsh. I think my straight-edged brush is a bit bristly and tough. So I've got some yellow on here. I'm just going to put it right in the middle here. So I'm going to paint right over the top. And because yellow is a little bit transparent, as you can see, it will blend into that green and that red quite nicely. Just want to blend that out a little bit. That'll work when I dry the paint off once more. Now if you've got a slightly wet brush for this, just damp, it will help slide this yellow and blend it when you get to the edges here. And you can see, because it's on top of the red now, that's on top of the yellow ochre, it's now coming out quite brightly. and it's sitting on the top very nice. Okay, so if you feel the green's coming a bit too far, you can add some more of that yellow on the top there. What's also nice is if you mix the yellow with your green, or if you've got a more of a limey green, I've got a leaf green here. Let me just put a touch of that in my palette. This bright green, especially down here, will help blend with the yellow and give you even more tone. Okay, so the lime green's going to really make this stand out. I'll bring this up to the side a little bit. Mix it with the yellow, and you just mix on your canvas. You get that up to the edge there, where we had that bit of a hole. Now the red is still coming through. You still get a hint, which is kind of giving your painting some texture now, which is what you want with a piece of fruit like this. You want a bit of texture. There you go. So you just keep going until you feel you've got the tones right. This is very green here, but that's okay. And again, because every pear is different, it's not really going to matter. So, I think we're ready. Make it quite bright right down the middle here. It's lifting off underneath, so you just got to be careful, otherwise I'll start to get these streaks. Don't matter, I can still go back over it afterwards. Okay, so there we go. Now, to make anything look realistic, you need a range of tone. Now, we've kind of got the basis, but we still need some more harsher shadows. So I'm going to get a smaller rounded brush now, and I'm going to get out my dark brown, so burnt umber kind of brown. Black's a bit harsh, and I would avoid black for shadows, although people do use it for making shadows. But burnt umber, I think, on this is absolutely fine. Let me just dampen my brush slightly. So down here, I want this to go even darker, so I'm going to get some burnt umber on my brush here, and I'm going to go around the edge here. And while it's still a bit wet with that lime green, again, it will just blend out. Now, if it doesn't blend out, okay, dip in the water, get rid of the excess water, and then you'll see that the water will help blend the paint on a dry layer underneath. And I'll show you that technique again in a moment when we come to do some of these shiny white patches. But let me just get some more dark down here and let it blend out. Okay, so you've got some real dark tones now coming down there. Now you can do the same on the other side, just to give it a bit more shape around here. And now it's gone a bit darker, a bit drier, sorry. You can add a bit more red just to the edges and just blend it back out. Again, if it doesn't blend, you can get some of that yellow and you can add some yellow just to help it blend into the middle. But you can see I haven't made the green or the red come too far in. There's still a nice patch of yellow running through the middle here. But I think that is about right. You can add a bit more shadow up here maybe, because we know this is a bit of a cylindrical part of the pear up here for it to curve round, just to give that a bit more depth there. This has kind of disappeared now with my yellow, so I'm going to just bring this back in. So I had a bit of a red neck here, if you remember, coming into the middle. So I'm just going to put that back in while the yellow's a little bit wet. And as the red runs out on the brush, you can kind of just rub it, and it'll, you know, you see, I've just added a bit more red there, just to give the pear a bit more shape, okay? So there we go. So that's the background. Now we want this to be completely dry to add any more detail. So out comes the hairdryer again, and let's just dry this off. Okay, there we go. It's a bit sticky, so it could be a bit dry, but let's crack on so I can show you the next phase. But if I were you, I'd get that completely dry, okay? Now, I want to add some shine, because we all know the texture of a pear, if the light was shining on it, it would really give a bright reflection. So you can see on this painting here, I've got them in those spaces, in 2 spots on the pear. So I'm going to get some white acrylic. Let me just put some in my palette. Now I only need a small brush for this, so I'm going to use that small one that I just did with the green. Let me find that back out. Here we go. Okay, very clean, okay? Can be slightly damp if you need it to be. And now let me show you what will happen. When you've got this white, I just need to mix this up a little bit. It's gone a bit funny, okay? Okay, so I've got some white. You're going to put on this bit here a white blob, okay? And if it's dry, it will sit on the top quite nicely, okay? So it goes quite bright. So it's quite harsh at the moment, and we want it to dispense. We don't want it to be a bright blob like this. So the trick is to clean off the white from your brush and have a wet brush, not dripping, but wet. And then on the ends here, let the water just blend out the white so it disappears. And because it's waterproof, the acrylic, it's like plastic, it will just sit on the top. So just let it disperse out. Okay? Clean off your brush and just keep going around the edges, and it will slowly disappear into the paint behind it. Now if it doesn't, okay, I feel that's working quite nicely, but if it isn't, get some tissue and you can dab it around the edges, or even your finger, and like smudge it as if it's like chalk, and just let the white paint kind of blend out, okay? And we're going to do another one down here, so let's do this again. So load up your brush with some white, put a circle or a square, just a blob where you want the main shine to be. So here, if the light's coming from this side, I'm going to capture these 2 points here, because this is a sphere, so it will be here, and it will be, you know, on that bulge there. Alright, so while it's still wet, work quickly, get rid of the white on your brush, have it a little bit damp, and just let the water blend the edges into the paint behind it, okay? And just keep going. Wipe off the paint from your brush, otherwise you'll just keep putting white back down again. As you can see, I don't touch the middle again, just around the edges for it to kind of disappear. You can use a cloth to help blend it out. And you can use your fingers to help blend it out. Or if you need to, just keep watering it down slightly while it's still wet. This will only work while it's wet. If it dries, it's okay. It's not a disaster. You've just got to kind of do it again, okay, on top of the dried paint. Okay? Okay, there we go. I've lost it in the middle a bit. What I'm doing, you see, is I'm looking at the video on my screen that's recording, and I can see there's a patch here. So you as well, if you step back, it's all right when you look at it up close, it looks okay, but step back and just have a look at it from a distance and see if you've got that shine in the right place, okay? It is going to dry quite quickly, and if you keep working on it, it's going to start lifting off the original white underneath. Won't lift off any yellow or green because that's been dried with the hairdryer. So you could put water on this bit and it's not going to do anything to it. It's set, it's dry. But if it's still wet and it keeps lifting off, dry it, and then you can work into the white a bit more if you need to. Okay, all right then, so there are my little shines. Now that's going to be dry there. Again, looking in the screen, that looks a bit harsh there. So I'm just going to get some water and just see if I can blend that back out. That needs to dry a bit more now. See, I've lifted it off in the middle, you see? I need to wait for it to be really dry. I'm very impatient. I'm sure I've got some students who are too, and it lifts it back off again. I might just need to just leave that to dry. I can come back anyway. All right then, now you want to keep working into this part, okay, until you're really happy with it, because the next stage is going to be right on top of it and we can't then change anything. So you've got to get this completely dry and completely finished, ready for the next phase. Now the next phase is the spots, okay, the textured spots. Now I have got somewhere, I don't think I got it out, an old toothbrush. Here we go. And this is what's going to create the spots. Now I'm going to have to kind of do this more flat, but you'll get the idea. I'm going to get my burnt umber again, okay, into my palette. Where should I put it in this one? So you don't need much, and then you need some water. So you're going to dip your toothbrush into an old toothbrush into some water, and then you're going to rub it on the burnt umber. You can see it goes very wet, you see? So that's what you want. You want to really mix it up so you've got lots of very watery paint on your brush. Now I'll do it upright so you can see what I'm doing, but then I'll lie it down because it won't work. I'm going to flick myself now. So what you do is with the end of your paintbrush is you flick it, okay? Ooh, can you see? You flick it like this. Okay, if it's a bit watery, mine looks a little bit watery, I'm going to put a bit more paint in that. And what will happen, it will start splattering random spots on there, and that's what a pear is. Don't mind if it goes around the edge because we're going to cover all of that up. Okay, so there we go. I'm sure this is flicking me as well. Yeah, it's going all over my hand over here. get some texture on the top of that pear. Now it is a bit messy, so probably shouldn't have worn a white t-shirt, but anyway. Let me just hold this a bit closer so you can see. You see it's put some brown spots on it, so it's textured. If you want to make them a bit harsher and thicker, I mean, I think there's some harsher ones on this painting down here that I did before, but that'll do. If you get like an unwanted splatter, okay, while it's wet with your tissue, you can remove them if you're very careful. So if you get a kind of splat going all the way across it and it doesn't look very pear-like, just with a bit of a damp tissue, you can just lift it off, okay? So there's your basis of your pear now, okay? Now the top, very simply, is some burnt umber again. Let's just make a quick stalk. If I were you, I would dry this with a hairdryer, okay, first. So with a small brush, get yourself some burnt umber on the end and give yourself a stalk. Okay, now you can keep the background red, okay, in which case you've got the stalk. I'm now going to cover that over because I am going to do a background, but you can leave it red. You can have a red background and you can get rid of the chalk and you can leave it red and we can just do this bottom bit, but I will show you how to get this blue texture. But if you mix a bit of yellow or red into your burnt umber, so it's a bit lighter, you can put another line of a slightly lighter brown on the top of it so that you've got a bit of texture on the, a bit of shadow and tone on the top of it, and you could add a bit of that brown around the bottom just here, just to add a bit of shadow where the stalk comes from. Okay, so I can show you how to do the background because I think that mottled effect is something a lot of students would like to know. While that's drying, let me get my bigger brush and just fill in this bottom bit because I can, and then I'll get my hairdryer if it's still not dry. So this bottom bit, I'm going to grab my green, okay, my bright green this time that I had from before, okay, and I'm going to go around the edge of my pear now. This is where you might want to have a straight brush again, so you can go right up to the edge of your pear. Go. A lot more paint in there. Now it's coming out really dark because it's got this underpainting, okay? But if you put a first layer on and then it's too dark for you and you want to add more green on the top, let it dry and then you'll be able to go back over it. And it will brighten it up. But you just need this initial layer first. And because the red showing through, it is giving it a bit of texture. There we go. Go around the edge of the pear carefully. You see it's covering up all the chalk now. Now in the video, this is looking very dark, and it is dark, but while it's wet, there is still a shadow that can come from the bottom of the pear here. So I'm going to get some of that. You can use brown, actually, and I'll show you a different colour, purple. If you use purple, purple is great for shadows. So I'm actually going to grab a purple acrylic. Okay, by all means you can mix your own, but I've got a bright purple here. And purple is a nice colour to do shadows with, on any painting really. Let me just get rid of that green, clean off my brush a bit. I've got murky water now, we need to change the water. Okay, so put some purple on your brush, and while it's wet you can add some round this side. Now because my brush was a little bit wet, you can see what's happening, it's lifting off the green. You see that? Let me dry it off, because otherwise it won't sit on there. So you can see you have to work with the paint. If it's not working, it's because it's still wet. So let me just dry this off. Okay, that's better. Now let's go again. I'm not sure you can see that purple, maybe slightly in the video. I'll hold it up in a moment. Put green on your brush again, and so it blends in. You can see it adds a nice shadow on that side. If I clean off the purple, now it's dry, I can collect some more of this bright green. Can you see it will now sit on the top over here and go a bit brighter. I've still got a bit of this bright green from earlier, so you mix on the canvas. So the more layers, the more kind of texture you're going to create in your work. Okay, and you can see it's dark on this side where there's a shadow. Alright. Okay, we're almost there. Should we do the background then? Let's get the background in. Now I'm going to use quite a bit of white, and I've already got a bit of white there from before. I also want a really nice blue. What have I got? Now this too is going to sit nicely on the top of that red, you'll see. So I can have quite a dry brush for this. I've got to clean the water back in. Okay. Brush is tiny bit damp but mostly dry. So let me just get this blue and put this right on the top here. Okay. I haven't mixed this with white or anything, it's just the blue. And you can go right up to your pear. Now to give the pear a bit of a glow, if you go close to the pear but don't touch it and you leave a tiny bit of red around the outside, you don't have to do this, but it will make it glow, you'll see when this dries. It'll almost give the pear a bit of a glow if you've got that red. Now, if you just, I've just put white on my brush, and then you can kind of go in all different directions like this. Now, the white's going to help it sit on the top. You can give the background quite a cool texture. I mean, you can have it smooth, okay? Or if you just put your, make your brush go crisscross, crisscross, which is kind of the technique I use for the middle bit when I was doing the yellows. No particular direction. You'll get like a nice texture for the background. I did this painting when I was teaching, and I went into a primary school, and we were doing this with the smaller children. So it is a technique that can kind of be for any beginner and any age, just to learn how to use acrylics. It's a great starter because you need to use quite a lot of techniques. So wet on wet, wet on dry, blending. There's quite a lot involved. So it's a great starter. Crisscross, 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 crisscross. And if you want it to dry, and then add more, because it is obviously showing the red underneath with a bit more texture. Now I'm going to go over this stalk. And then I'll put it back in after. Some of my students did leave the background red, which is absolutely fine. Right, so we're almost there. Now again, when you're going right up to the pear, leave a tiny little glow of red. Can you see how the edge, the red, kind of helps it glow? I don't know if you can see that in the recording, but it's just a tiny, like a millimetre, very small, around the edge, and let it taper out when you get to the shadow at the bottom. This is when you can go around the edges of your canvas too. Now if you're doing this in a sketchbook, you'd need really good quality paper for the paper to hold the amount of acrylics that we have done with all these layers. If your paper is thin at all, it will start warping. It could even start disintegrating and not allowing many layers. It could be lifting off the paint far too easily. This is why canvas is kind of the best surface to use, but again, use what you've got, and if you know you've got an acrylic sketchbook or something like that, then you should still be able to do it. But it's nice to work outside the sketchbook. I do try and encourage students to not stay in the sketchbook all the time, okay? It's okay for samples with paintings, but this is more like a final piece, so it's better to have a different surface for that. So there you go. Okay, this is very rough here, but might just need to leave it to dry for it to allow more layers of paint to go on top of it. So you could keep working into that and making it a bit neater around the edges. Let's bring this video to a close now, because we've taken almost an hour for this. Right then, let's get this stalk back in. I should dry this first. Let's not be sloppy. Try not to rush it like I am now. There we go. A bit of a lighter brown, yellow ochre is a good one, just to add a lighter tone on the one side of the stalk. Obviously the left side, because this is where we've got the other shines. And there you go. There's your pear. So every time I paint this, it goes slightly differently, as you can see, but that's the idea. There you go. Let me hold this up a bit closer. There you go. There's your pear. I need to go around these edges a bit better, but there you go. You get the idea. Good luck with your pear painting. Hopefully it teaches you how to use acrylics a bit better, and how to layer them. And then you can do this now with any other still life or any other acrylic painting. It'll make you think about underpainting, make you think about layering, and hopefully it's given you a good introduction on all the techniques on how acrylic can work. So good luck with it. Send it in so I can check it out for you and give you some hints and tips. You could take photos at all different stages, maybe, for when you send how you've done it to me, and then I could always pinpoint the moment where things, you know, could have been altered to improve the painting overall. But good luck with it. It's just a tester, a beginning of using acrylics. Have fun, guys. See you soon. Bye bye.